welcome to Picken and Birtles. We're on the podcast, Rolling with the Punches. And this is our first episode. We wanted to introduce ourselves. So my name's Connor Picken. I'm a creative from Southwest London, working as a photographer. And Ben, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm a bit less interesting. I'm Ben Birtles, and I go to Cardiff University, and I'm doing journalism. And I love boxing, so hence, why not start a boxing podcast?
Yeah, exactly. So I think for me and Ben, the thing is we've known each other through school. So we went to school together, and we're always texting about boxing, going back and forth every day, every fight day, every new interview. And then we were like, why don't we just start a podcast and film it? Because we love it, don't we?
Yeah, it just makes sense, mate. Definitely.
So I think for us, because there's a lot of podcasts out there, Ben, isn't there? That like, you look at them and you think, this has got like, you get like IFL, which has got like 650,000 followers. Then you get podcasts that maybe have got like under 200 subscribers. But we still watch both of them. And so for us, this is truly out of the passion, isn't it? So we just want to talk about boxing. We're going to have loads of cool guests. We've got some cool segments coming up as well, don't we? Like, we want to talk about amateur boxing a bit. And just kind of just see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it's about, changing things up a little bit and trying to do something a bit unique. But on the whole, yeah, like you say, just talk boxing like we usually would, and then hopefully there are a few people that want to listen.
We'll see. But yeah, mate, that's literally it, and that's us. And so hopefully we'll have some really cool guests, and you guys will enjoy the journey of this new podcast.
Yeah, I think, just to start, I guess, Connor, you start. How did you get into boxing, mate? And what's been the journey to get here to where you are, which is absolutely loving the sport?
That's a brilliant question, actually. So when I came quite late into boxing, so none of my family are kind of big boxing lovers. They don't love the sport. My old man will watch a couple fights, like the really big fights back in the day, like, you know, the Nigel Benn kind of Chris Eubank fights and that. But when I was being raised, he never showed me boxing. And so when I was like 16, 17, some of my friends, Louis and Alexander and like Dylan Grace, they bought me a ticket to see, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Anthony Joshua. It was in Cardiff, and it was against Takam, actually. It was meant to be for Pulev. And even then, I wasn't like the biggest boxing head. And so after that fight, I was hooked, mate. Like, we arrived at 5 p.m. I didn't know any of the undercard, but I loved it. And then since then, there's not a card where I haven't known every single fighter on the card. I haven't loved it. And it's just grown and grown and grown. And with the kind of new regeneration and new rise of the last few years, that's where my love's kind of come in for it. Do you get what I mean?
Where did you say it was, mate? Where was the fight?
It was in Cardiff. It was in Millennium Stadium. AJ versus Takam. So that was my first real fight. And then I went to, which was like one of the best fights I've been to, was Tony Bellew versus Usyk.
Oh, mate, I didn't realise you were there.
Yeah, mate. That was an unreal fight. And kind of so for the last 2 or 3 years, and then I just absolutely loved it since that day. And I've never kind of looked back, and that's where it's come from. But what about yourself?
So kind of the opposite a little bit. My dad's, he was boxing obsessed in the 80s and 90s. He showed me, I don't know how many times, Henry Cooper knocking over Muhammad Ali at Wembley. I now know like the exact moment it happens and how it happens because of the amount of times he showed me it.
Nice.
Again, like you said, Ben Eubank, I think for that generation was like absolutely massive. The Watson fights, the Joe McLennan fight, slightly more, sad really the way that ended. But then also, Duran, Hearns, Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, it was a great era. And I think him having shown me those fights, I slowly got into boxing in the modern day. And I think a big catalyst for that, mate, was probably George Groves.
Really?
Being that he was a Hammersmith boy, his fights with Carl Froch in sort of, I think, was it 2013? I think was the first one.
Was that the first one? Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously before then, I had an interest in the heavyweights like everyone does in this country. It's huge, but I think that was the main catalyst, and obviously the controversy in the first one, and then what happened in the second, and the build up and everything around it. And Kell Brook and those kind of guys back then, 2013, 14. That's what really started. And from then, I've just followed it constantly on, like you said, IFL TV and all that kind of stuff, just constantly following boxing. So, yeah.
Well, I have the question there. So you're talking about the Froch fight, Froch Groves. Was that stoppage the worst stoppage you've ever seen? Because for me, it's one of the worst.
It's up there, mate. There's been some bad ones. I think the only thing I'd say about that one is it ended up being a really good stoppage, mate, because probably you could argue without that bit of controversy, we wouldn't have had, the big night at Wembley that we had, if that makes sense. Like it
Very
needed
true.
that to sort of, build it up. And I think it's probably up there, mate, to be fair. I've seen some bad ones, and certainly I've seen we'll come on to British boxing in a minute and some of the decisions we've seen recently. But I think it's got to be up there.
Yeah, I think it's Howard Foster, who's a cracking ref. Just bad night at the office for him, wasn't it, that night? Oh well.
Yeah, well, he was the ref, wasn't he, on Saturday night with Warrington? Let Warrington go on. Actually, he was a bit of the opposite. But I don't want to say too much about that, really. But yeah,
it's a tricky one, I suppose, because when you rewatch it, you genuinely do look at him and think maybe is he coming back here? But I don't know. I don't know. It's hard for kind of when you're a fighter, you want to go on, but it's hard for us to comment on it.
Yeah, I mean, Warrington's probably too tough for his own good, isn't he? So it was just one of those ones where I thought maybe, if I'm being totally honest, if that was Maurizio Lara and it was the other way around, I think the ref would have stopped that fight. But it's just one of those things. I guess the outcome was the outcome in the end, and Warrington luckily has gone home safe.
I mean, one thing I do want to touch upon is I watched Robert Smith's interview yesterday. Did you watch that?
No, I didn't, mate. No, I didn't catch it.
It was with Andrew McCart on IFL TV. And it's just the way things, as I think everyone says, British Boxing Board of Control are a really good board in a lot of things they do, but it's the way Robert Smith comes out and he's just so like he defends everything, every action of every one of his referees or his judges. And it's just like, I want him to take a bit more of like, just sorry, like he's there saying, yeah, it was clearly 118 or 111. And he was like, our judges, they're brilliant. They're two brilliant judges with the same card. So, you can't argue with it. So. Yeah,
I think you're right there, but I'm not sure about sorry. I think it's more about, holding these referees and judges to account a little bit more. I know Eddie touched on it in the week. It's just more, I think there's probably a bit of room for maybe just putting them in front of a panel and just not, like people grinning them, but just to justify the decisions that they've made. That's the only thing I like to see. Everyone's entitled to the way they view the fight, and you're going to get bad decisions. It's always going to happen. There's 3 judges. The likelihood is occasionally you're going to get a bad one. But I would like, with the volume of bad decisions we've seen, I would just like to see a bit more accountability for it, I think. I don't know if you agree.
No, yeah, I agree. And that's definitely the way forward, isn't it? Because it's completely subjective. And also, it is a round by round sport. So it doesn't matter how the previous rounds went. Every round is a contest, which I suppose when you're listening to the commentary, which is something Robert Smith actually said, you're listening to commentary and you're thinking, oh yeah, you're right. He has boxed brilliant for the first 6 rounds. And so you're kind of more likely to give the 7th round. But when every round is its own contest, that's when the sport becomes so difficult to judge.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, spot on.
But I mean, someone will have
there's
to
a lot. There's a
anyway.
lot of other things like with judging boxing. Like it depends what side of the ring you're sat on. Watching it from the Sky cameras. No, watching it from like a multi-camera perspective compared to being in there. I know I've seen a fight live. Like I saw Regis Prograis, Josh Taylor.
Yeah,
I was actually scoring a lot of that fight when I was there live at the O2 in favour of Regis, and just the way it just looked like he had more of the successful work. And then I watched the fight back on Sky, and I was like, "What was I watching?" Like, do you know what I mean? I scored it completely different. So it's like it's quite a hard thing to do, I think, scoring. I think you've got to bear that in mind. But certainly at the weekend, when you've got 2 scores of 118, 111, like, I don't think there's anyone else on Twitter I read that had anything even by 4 rounds. It was, it blew my mind. It almost looks fixed, but clearly not.
Yeah, I mean, I had the exact same thing on the Lewis Ritson versus Robbie Davis Jr. fight. So I was there at Newcastle, right? And I watched the fight, and I was thinking, oh, Ritson has absolutely fucked this. And then obviously he won it in the end. And you go back, and it is actually closer than I think the scorecards gave it. But it's that exact same thing. When you're there, it's so different. So,
spot on. Yeah. So what next? I guess now it's.
So what do you want to talk about? I guess there's so much to talk about in boxing. We could cover so much. But for me, what I want to know from you is we talk about why we love boxing, but who's your biggest passion in boxing? So whether that's your person you look up to as a fighter, as a journalist? Like, who do you look up to in boxing the most, would you say?
So for me, from someone that's studying journalism, it's not necessarily what I want to do, but to be a boxing writer or a broadcaster or commentator would be amazing. And I think in the last sort of 5 years, the work that the BBC have done, so like Mike Costello, the work he does, he's a man that hopefully we can get him on, like, we were discussing. He's a man that I look up to. In terms of in the fight game, I respect most fighters. There's not really anyone that I don't respect, because 10, 12 ounce gloves, you know what I mean? 12 rounds, you've got to respect any man that gets in there. But I think, I've always been a Fury fan, a big man on Tyson Fury. The journey, the way he came back, it's got to be massive. I was an AJ fan as well, coming through. Again, like I just said, touched on, there's a big like polarization there at the moment. Of it seems to me that you get a lot of like football fans almost that seem to think you need to be a Fury fan or a Joshua fan. But whenever, like, is it going to happen again that we have two heavyweight champs from Britain? I think we should just respect both of them, if that makes sense. So I think from a fighter perspective, I respect everyone, but from a personal point of view, I think Mike Costello and Steve Bunce and those broadcasters, I'm a big fan. What about yourself?
Well, yeah. So I just, first of all, I completely agree with what you're saying there about the Fury and Joshua side. It's like, you're not sitting on the fence, but just enjoy it for boxing. Sometimes it's like, don't be so defensive on one side, you can still favor it. But for myself, I mean, on a boxer level, like who I looked up to when I first started, loving the sport, it had to be Tony Bellew. The passion he showed. It was after, I think it was the Makabu fight, and it was in round 3 when he kind of knocks out Makabu, right?
Nasty
and he just
stoppage,
goes down.
That was, yeah.
Oh, it was horrific, mate. And then when he's just crying and he's like in the ring, and I was like, the passion this man puts into the sport, that's why it's such a good sport. And I feel
him
like,
and Coldway, hey Connor, like that's such a good pairing. You know what I mean? I used to love to watch them, but yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Go on, carry on.
No, mate, you're right. And I think for me, the modern day version of that, what I'm seeing is almost in Conor Benn. And just the way he talks about his family, although he doesn't come from nothing, because his father was obviously Nigel Benn, the passion he puts into his fights and that he doesn't take a backward step, I just love watching him. So he's one I'm really excited to watch as he progresses in his career, as he takes on more PBK potentially in summer.
Yeah, that's going to be a big fight. And what do you reckon of this weekend? Speaking of Kelly Avanesian, mate, how you scoring that fight? What do you reckon? Prediction?
So my prediction's really roundabout, right? So look, on form, current form, I'd say Avanesian should be the favourite. However, I do think Kelly is a better fighter, and if he walks in on form and shows up, then I've got to give it to Kelly. And I think Kelly might be an early stoppage, to be honest. Like, I'd say within 5 or 6 rounds, if he's on form. If not, and it goes kind of 12 rounds, I have to give it to Avanesian, because I think he's got the experience just to win those rounds. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, first things first, I think on the scales today, it changed my opinion, mate. So for the past week, I've been Avanesian all day long. I really have. There's something about Avanesian and the way he boxed, particularly in 2019. Well, I just rate him so highly, and I think Kelly is at a stage in his career now where this fight for me is the breakthrough fight. It's the big fight. It's the fight where he arrives onto the world scene. And I just worried this past week about, his conviction at that in the pro ranks. I think he looked a bit novice-y in that Ray Robertson fight, dare I say, and took probably one too many risks. Or my phone is just going nuts. Probably took one too many risks. But then I saw him on the scales today and how sharp he was and how up for the fight he looked. And I just thought, you know what? I can see the same, Connor. I can see him going out there and blasting him away, blowing him away. He's a great fighter, but I just always had that reservation with Josh Kelly about, does he look a bit novice-y? Does he look like he's ready? But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you. I think Kelly can win early. I really do.
So one interesting point here is, obviously you said for you this is like his breakup fight, and I feel like two people who are often compared because they are, although Kelly's had over 100 amateur fights. Conor Benn, his breakup fight was Formella, but Kelly's is Avanesian, so they're not really comparable, are they?
Yeah, but I think with that, for Conor Benn, there was just, because of the sort of stigma around his dad,
Yeah.
I felt like that Formella win was a chance for him to not break through onto the world scene per se, but just to sort of show some people that, look, I'm my own man, and I can really fight, if that makes sense, really in simple terms. But I think with the Kelly one, it's more of a, he can break now into the top 10 of the 4 governing bodies and can really push for a world title fight, in the near future. So I think that's probably the slight difference. What do you reckon? Do you agree? Or
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like right now, to be completely honest, although Ben's had more fights, I'm almost certain he has quite a few more. I feel like Kelly is actually almost one level above. And so I feel like if Kelly goes through Evanesian, he is almost taking a backward step because Conor Benn hasn't proved himself at that level yet. Although it's a brilliant domestic fight.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah.
I feel like it was a fight 3-4 fights ago that would have been brilliant, like almost a Coley Chamberlain. Like when we had that was a brilliant fight. And I feel like this now, for Kelly, will almost be taking a backward step for the money, because obviously it's probably one of the biggest domestic fights at the moment. And so it's like, do you take that step back and then, I guess, hope that if the winner of that then gets to go on, or do you just push on anyway? I don't know. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, I think like the one thing with Adam Booth, Conor, is he doesn't go early. He doesn't take too many risks with his fighters. So I think in that sense, you've probably got a bit more chance of Kelly sticking around if he beats Evanesian for Conor, just because Adam's quite reserved. He's quite a reserved character and doesn't like to throw his fighters in too many tough situations. So I think they'd wait around. And to be honest with you, mate, it's all about the money, isn't it? Let's be honest. So
yeah.
No, it is. Fair enough. So I think, whatever makes sense financially, they'll do, and Eddie will do. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much.
You're right. If it makes money, it does make sense. Anyway, it's the fight I'm looking forward to. But is there any other fights you're looking forward to then coming up?
Loads, mate. The schedule is brilliant, and in terms of British boxing, I think it's definitely going to be one of the best years, not of the past 20, 30 years, but probably ever. With the fights that could potentially happen. Obviously, we were off to a bad start with Warrington, but yeah, look, a Coley Glowacki, I don't know what you think about that fight, but for me, that's the one I've had my eyes on for a while. I think Glowacki's really awkward, throws crazy shots at crazy angles, will rough you up, but I think a Coley's got the beating of him. I really do. I don't know what you think, but I back a Coley in that fight.
It's weird with a Coley because I looked at him on certain fights and I think, fucking hell, how have you got to this point? I'm like, how is he here now? Like the style, the awkwardness, the almost like earlier on, I didn't think he could box very well. He was just throwing loose, long punches. And since he's been with Shane McGuigan, hasn't he? He's just he's honed in on his style. And I think I love it. And it's really exciting because he's hit so heavy. And so I agree, actually, if he keeps him long, because that's what Lawrence Curley's brilliant at. And then he can wrap him up when he's on the inside, because how long his arms are and how tall he is. I actually agree with you, to be honest. But then what they're talking about then is to see Lawrence Coley go up to heavyweight, and I actually wouldn't like that.
Mate, I read that, or I saw that, I think, today, and I just thought, what on earth is going on there? Like, I think he can go and have big fights, unifying the division. He doesn't need to go up to heavyweight.
For me, that's almost like, is that because his profile's not big enough? Because if his profile's big enough, he'd stay.
Yeah, but naturally, Conor, like when you win a world title, your profile will grow. And being a big name like Glowacki, okay, he's not the best in the division, but he's certainly been a world beater before. So, why not grow your profile at Cruiser? I can understand that decision.
I'm with you. I think you should.
Maybe he could have a go at Bridgerweight. Hey, Conor.
Yeah, maybe Dave Allen comes back and then fights Lawrence Coley at Bridges. So we'll see. But it was a bit of a rogue one. I saw that and thought that's a bit weird. But anyway, we've got the fight first to look forward to, and then for me, a fight that we actually haven't talked about, which is this weekend. So by the time this goes out, the potentially will be the result. Because considering it's tomorrow. Marku versus Charlton. I mean, that's mental. I love Charlton I only saw him against Joe Laws, and since I watched that fight, the way he handled himself before, especially after, he kind of like shrugged it off and was like, yeah, I just beat one of your ticket sellers. I am the real deal. I'm here because I'm skillful. I'm not here because I'm a big name. And that's what I really like. So I'm a huge Charlton fan going into this. I don't know what your thoughts are on the fight.
Yeah, I agree. On the scales today, that was a good watch, mate. They, you know, Marku didn't mess around. I think I expect it to be dangerous for Rylan. You know, Marku will throw big shots. He can box Marku though, but he will pile on the pressure, I think, as the fight goes into sort of the later rounds. But then again, like, you know, Rylan's a decent fighter.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to say Sam Jones is taking too many risks, but he doesn't really like mess around with his fighters, which I quite like, you know, like with Big Joe and stuff. But I think, yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it, but I think it's a close one to call. It's a lot closer than sort of other people are saying who I've spoken to personally. I don't know about you, but a lot of people seem to have this like big thing around Marku and think he's, you know, going to be the next best thing. But I don't know. That's a tough fight. That's a really tough fight. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I think it's because he's got those 300,000 followers on Instagram. He used to be a kickboxer, didn't he? He has those Albanian fans with him. But what you're saying there about Sam Jones, it's true. I really rate him because when you look at even fighters like Solomon Dakras, right? He's turning pro quite late, I think. I might be wrong there. Or later on. So they want to chuck him in.
Late-ish,
yeah. So it's like, if they could chuck him in, they're talking about chucking him in with Lovejoy. I mean, I don't know if that's happening.
I think it is, mate. A little insider for you there. I think
really?
it is. Yeah.
Well, I mean, see, that's mental because what's Lovejoy on then? 18 KOs?
He's 19-0, but he, like, nobody has any footage of him. Nobody knows like where he's taking his fights. He's he could come in and be like, everyone might be like, oh my God, like this guy's brilliant. Or he might come in and he just turns out he's just been knocking out, you know, dare I say it, bin men. Really and truthfully. But yeah.
I mean, how he's made it into the top 25. Was it top 25 or top 15 with the WBA?
It's quite funny, no? Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It shows you really in boxing. You just got to get a few wins together and you can find yourself in a good place.
Yeah, literally. But now that's the fight I'm looking forward to. What else is? Have you heard about the Dillian White rumours that might be moved?
Move where?
So March the 6th is the date, but it might be moved to March 27th because right now Dillian White's in Portugal.
Right, and yeah, it's on the red list.
Yeah, and the government have said that if he comes back, he has to isolate in one of the government hotels, and Dillian White doesn't want to do that.
I mean, yeah, it's just unfortunately it's part and parcel of like boxing at the moment. These things are just things that are happening. But I worry that might unsettle him a little bit because immediate rematches in history, unfortunately, they haven't always, you know, been a good thing for a fighter that's just lost. So I think everything needs to be right in that camp, and I wouldn't want to take too many risks. One fight I was going to ask you about, Connor, Craig Richards is looking like he's going to get a shot at the world title, would you believe? Coming off the back of that win on Channel 4, it looks like he might get a shot at Dimitri Bivol. What do you reckon?
That's brilliant. Was that Channel 4 card? Was that Hennessy?
5, maybe. Channel 5.
Was that Channel 5?
I think it was
Hennessy, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Shakan Pitters he beat.
Yeah, I watched it. No, that was when it was like so. I mean, I don't know. It probably was real, but it seemed so fake when they were just chucking water over in the presser. Do you remember that? And I was like, this is ridiculous. I mean,
that was a good fight though. I like that fight. I enjoyed that fight,
and it was free.
Yeah, exactly. Bonus, mate. Double bonus.
But Bivol will walk through him, won't he? Really?
He can bang though, old Craig. Fan. Spider Richards, mate. He can bang. He looks small and like looks deceiving, but he's got a strong left hook on him. Yeah, he really does. So who knows? It's boxing. Anything can happen.
Exactly, mate. I mean, someone talking about going back to fight camp. This is a really rogue question. But one fighter who kind of like I became a huge fan of was Kane Baker. I don't know if you remember Kane Baker. He fought against. I was going to say Kalia Fight. I don't think it was. The fight was postponed because the fighter felt ill the night before. And then you saw him crying on camera to talk about how much it meant for him. And he was just one of these fighters where I think due to the current pandemic, so many small fighters have been given an opportunity. And I think that's brilliant. And hopefully Eddie and Frank will do that going forward. We'll just be giving much more smaller fighters opportunities.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm going to praise him here, but MTK Global, they've been brilliant. I mean, tonight they've got a show on. They've got there's a fight on tonight. Danny Carr versus Dean Dodge.
Yeah.
I think it's the English featherweight or English super featherweight. Mate, that's a hell of a fight. That is a really, really good fight. To have that on YouTube, like that's a really good fight. and they've been good at sort of getting those small hall fighters out and boxing. To be fair to them, but I completely agree with what you just said, Connor. You're spot on. I think hopefully Frank and Eddie can be sensible. I know this pandemic looks as if it's coming to a bit of an end now, but hopefully they can keep being sensible and giving these guys a chance, because it's it's the livelihoods, mate. Everything's on the line. You're a small fighter or a journeyman. You might fight, usually box 5-6 times a year, and that'll be enough to put food on the table. But right now, there's nothing. You could get a bit of sparring here and there, but there's really nothing going. So yeah, I agree.
Well, now I think there's a good point to end this pod for this episode for me would be to talk about our favorite upcoming fighter. So either debut or just started or about to make his debut. I don't mind. So what's yours?
I'm going to shout out Danny Morrell.
Yeah.
Just turned pro. I'm going to shout out Danny Morrell. I think he looked slick. He looked good in his debut, albeit against the guy who he was against. Dave Allen did a lot of good work. I think you can join me in agreeing that we've followed his journey as an amateur all the way through. Hopefully we can tag him in this and try and tip it down and get him on, because I'm sure he would come on if we're lucky. But yeah, I think Danny Morrell, but then sort of someone that's a bit further down the line, which is probably what we prefer. God. I mean, I want to say the obvious ones like Buatsi, but then he's not up and coming, is he? He's established himself. Yeah. So I don't know, mate. I'll try and think. You let me know who's yours, but I'll try and.
So for me, a fighter that I watched a whole bunch of his amateur fights, and it's Gentleman John Hedges or John Gentleman Hedges.
Right, yeah, John Hedges. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So and I agree, in his debut, I mean, he was awful. To be honest, and I don't know, like you said, Sam Jones, you just put him in there with an undefeated fighter for his debut. I mean, it was ridiculous. But I'm a huge fan of him because watching his amateur fights, he's an exceptionally good boxer. And also, I'm really looking forward to see Campbell Hatton. I can't wait to see what Ricky and his brother's done with him.
Yeah, Campbell Hatton's going to be good. He certainly seems fairly similar to his dad, so if that's anything to go by, he'll be good fun. But then I was going to say Dion Juma. He's another Dale youth boy. George Groves was at the same gym. Daniel Dubois was at Dale Youth for a period of time. Groves' rival, who am I thinking of? I've forgotten his name.
What, Carl Froch?
Dale Youth. No, not Carl Froch. the actual rival, the one that he hates. James DeGale.
Oh, James DeGale.
James DeGale.
Yeah.
James DeGale boxed out of Dale Youth. Anyway, what I was going to say, I have a mate at Dale Youth, or was at Dale Youth for a period of time. He ended up winning an ABA there, and his name's Joe Teal. His dad is a very, very close friend of mine, and he's informed me that Dion Juma is going to shock a lot of people and beat Billum Smith. And if you win one ABA, it's impressive as an amateur. If you win two, it's flipping amazing. And then if you nearly win three, you need to start considering this bloke as a serious contender at cruiserweight. So Dion Juma, for me, he's 11-0 now. He's got a big British title fight coming up, and he's definitely one to watch. So that would be my pick.
I'm with you on that. Actually, that's something. That's a brilliant fight. And shout out to my mate Nathan Thorley, who fought Billum Smith in fight camp. He was fighting really well. Switched off for 1 second, fight changed. But Dion Juma, I'm excited about, and that's why I like Hedges so much, because he's currently at super middle, I think, but he might even move up to light heavy, because when he fills out his hasn't got his man strength yet. So once he gets his man strength to fill out, he'll be fighting at light heavy, and then I doubt he'll ever make it to cruiser, but you never know, because he's literally on the border of super middle now. So he's just an interesting fighter to watch his progression. But I think that's there's some really exciting prospects there.
Right. Well, yeah, that's probably the first pod, isn't it, Connor?
Yeah, no, that's it. Thanks everyone for listening, and hopefully there'll be some more exciting guests and kind of following the journey down the line, or just get better and better.
Yeah, same from me. Thanks for the people that have tuned in to listen. I don't know how many people will, but I'm sure there'll be some that will be interested enough. Maybe my nan.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Connor said, just want to reiterate, we're definitely looking to get some guests on, and maybe some big guests down the line, but we won't tell you who yet. Just look out for that. So
exactly. Well, we appreciate it, and see you in a bit.